What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking yesterday about how the tropics are about to get active. Well, ladies and gentlemen, last night we had an area of interest tagged in the main development region going through parts of the lesser and greater Antilles, and we still have Debbie causing a very serious flash flooding threat for much of the East Coast. So we're going to go ahead and go over all of that for you guys right here. We're going to just briefly start with Debbie. We're going to spend like a couple of minutes talking about Tropical Storm Debbie, just for those who want a quick update, and then we'll get to the main meat of the video. So here's the situation. We have a Tropical Storm Debbie. It made landfall last night. We can go ahead and show you the archive right here for when it made landfall. We can show you that. Let's take a look at that. Made landfall as a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm with pressure of 995 millibars. It made landfall near Bulls Bay, South Carolina. It currently is a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm, and minimum central pressure is 996, and still causing a potentially very massive flash flooding threat for a lot of people. And that's the main thing I'm going to be talking about right now. So here's the flash flood potential. There is still a high risk of flash flooding from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way to Northern Virginia over here, which is pretty interesting, including the cities of Raleigh, Durham, and Roanoke. So that's some really bad stuff that's going to be coming your way, and we can go ahead and show you the rainfall potential we're seeing. We are still seeing potentially up to 4 to 6, or in some isolated areas of 8 to 12 inches of rain, especially in the Appalachian Mountains, where that looks like it's going to be a very big flash flooding threat. And this is expected to continue all the way up to through Pennsylvania, New York, and all the way up the East Coast and into Ontario and Quebec. So that's what we're keeping close tabs on, and that's what we're paying attention to. It's mainly the wind risk is pretty much over. The surge is pretty much over. Yeah, there's still a little bit of storm surge for parts of the Outer Banks in those areas, but overall, the rain threat is what we're paying attention to for the most part, and that's kind of where I'm going to leave Tropical Storm Debbie, as this thing is going to pretty much soon become extra tropical, and it's going to soon mainly be a flood threat, and soon it's going to dissipate. So this will be the last update from the Pat's Path Predictor channel on Debbie. So for those tuning in, now wanting to get to the main meat of the video, we finally can, as we can finally close on what was Hurricane Debbie. But what we are paying attention to next is this area of interest right here in the main development region. This now has a 30% chance of formation in the next 7 days. If we go ahead and show you the archive and pull up the earlier outlook, this was what we were looking at. We had a 20% chance this was tagged last night at 2 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. AOI has expanded further to the west to include the eastern two-thirds of the Dominican Republic. So we have to pay very close attention to this, because we now have a ton of operational and ensemble model support saying, hey, this could be a very big threat down the road. And when I mean big threat, I'm talking hurricane strength, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're paying attention to. So here's what we have as of 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is going to likely be updated either by the time I'm done recording this video or right at the end. So we'll go ahead and check right at the end if this thing is updated. So here's what we have. An area of low pressure could form in the central or western tropical Atlantic early next week. Some development of the system is possible while it approaches the Lesser Antilles during the early to middle part of next week, and moves generally northwest towards the Greater Antilles thereafter. 30% chance of formation in the next 7 days, and like I said earlier, this has a ton of model support for tropical development, so we're going to have to take this very seriously. Let's go ahead and show you the overall conditions of where this wave is. At this current point, the wave is either about to come offshore or it has come offshore. I can actually go ahead and pull up the Eastern Atlantic satellite imagery, because we saw that tropical wave earlier, and there it is right now. This is the tropical wave that we're paying attention to right here. It's currently over Mali and other parts of Western Africa. It is expected to come off the into the main development region in the next 12 to 24 hours. So we're going to be keeping tabs on that tonight when we are live streaming, which, by the way, we will start at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time to cover this, as well as Debbie. At least the last little glimpse of it. We'll spend a little bit of time on that. But anyway, Basically, this is the wave that we're paying attention to, and this is the wave that's going to start absorbing all this convection in the intertropical convergence zone, and that is the one that's going to organize and develop. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and show you the Atlantic-wide setup right here. And I want to go ahead and show the true color just to kind of get an idea of what's going on, because yes, there is some Sahara dust in parts of the subtropical Atlantic, but as we've been saying, the Sahara dust has been trending down, 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 and basically that's going to allow for this main development, for it not to enter the main development region, and allow for this thing to quietly start to organize and potentially develop as it gets to the middle part of the MDR, and then approaches the Lesser Antilles. And this is my main concern right here, because my concern is this is going to start organizing and developing before the Lesser Antilles. I know a lot of models are indicating it's going to organize as it's heading there, and we'll get to those in just a second. But that's my main concern in regards to all this, because the conditions are getting better over here. So here's the water vapor imagery right here. Yes, there is a ton of dry air in this part of the main development region and the Caribbean, but I fully expect that to change as we get more of this convection starting to move further to the west. And the eastern half of the main development region already has some significant moisture, and thanks to the ITCZ and other tropical waves that have moved through there. So overall, this wave is going to have a good first step, and then it's going to end up organizing and developing as it got to the central part of the main development region. So that's what we're keeping tabs on. That's what we're paying attention to, and we're going to go ahead and show you some other conditions that we are potentially looking at, such as global sea temperature, ocean heat content, and wind shear, because those three factors are what really concern me. Here's the sea surface temperatures. This system is expected to move off of Senegal, and it is expected to enter areas around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters. We're seeing more and more tropical waves originating further north up the coast of Africa compared to what we were seeing in June and July when they were further south and less likely to develop, although Beryl was a huge exception to that. We're seeing this now entering warmer waters than what we were seeing in previous. And that's already off the bat a big concern, especially for the Cabo Verde Islands, because I fully expect the Cabo Verdes to see some rainfall from this, potentially some flash flooding. And thanks to these warm waters, this definitely can allow for convection to fire up and burst up if all things go to plan. So that's what we're keeping tabs on. But my main concern is pretty much the western part of the main development region. You're noticing that there's a bit of a surge, I would say, of water temperatures going from about 28 to 29 to all the way to almost 30 degrees Celsius as you approach the Lesser Antilles. And this isn't just one isolated area. This is across the entire western half of the tropical Atlantic at least, with some waters getting even higher up and even hotter, up to potentially 30 degrees Celsius, potentially 31 degrees Celsius, which for those of you who do not know how much that temperature is, it's about 84 to 88 degrees altogether respectively. So that's what we're paying attention to in that regard, and I have a really bad feeling that as soon as this wave enters this area of warm water, things are going to start firing off. Not just because of that, but because we have insane amounts of ocean heat content across a lot of these areas. Look at how widespread this OHC is, first of all, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and compare this back to where we were in August of 2023. Just the thing you need to pay attention to is just how widespread this is, and whereas in 2023, if we go ahead and go to August 8th, it was a lot more concentrated, and you didn't see nearly as much OHC going out in the main development region, in parts of the Atlantic Basin, in parts of the Gulf of Mexico. You didn't really see nearly as much of that. And now what we're seeing with this in 2024, we're seeing a lot more OHC in the Gulf of Mexico. We actually have another eddy over here of 175 plus OHC that we need to pay attention to, because that could pose a very big threat if a tropical system starts organizing and makes plans to impact Texas. But in the meantime, the Gulf Stream has been absolutely insane with the OHC, and so is the Caribbean, to be honest, because we're now seeing areas of potentially over 200 OHC, which that is really good for explosive intensification, and that is my main concern. And you're also seeing OHC values of increasing to near 150 OHC east of the Lesser Antilles. Are you kidding me? That is absolutely insane, and that is absolutely scary to look at from a climatological perspective in the year 2024, because that's going to allow for potentially a faster intensification, faster organization if all things go according to plan, and that's one thing we're keeping an eye on. Another thing we're showing you is the wind shear, and all the way through pretty much it approaching the Antilles, it's going to be moving through low wind shear, at least after it gets out of the eastern main development region, of course. There is some wind shear up there. It's going to definitely fight that, but as it moves from pretty much past that and moves into a much lower shear environment, that low sheared environment lasts pretty much all the way up into the Lesser Antilles and all the way potentially past the Greater Antilles, as we show you the shear and the moisture forecast in just a second. Regardless of this, we all need to pay very close attention to it, and I am fully confident that the National Hurricane Center is going to really ramp up these probabilities by the end of tonight, and when we stream tonight, we're going to see how that goes. It's my best guess it's going to be either 40 or 50% probabilities in the next 7 days once we get up to there, so we're going to have to keep very close tabs on that in the meantime. Let's go ahead and show you the shear and the moisture forecast. I was looking at some models earlier, so that's kind of why it was there. Let's go ahead and show you the shear forecast first with the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. And I also want to show the anomalies as well, just to kind of see how above or below average this is based on the 30-year climatological trends. So we're starting to see more organization and development going on with according to a lot of these models. The wind shear outside of the eastern Atlantic just is completely quiet, and there's not really that much. And take a look at the wind shear in the Caribbean, take a look at the wind shear in the Atlantic Basin. The Gulf of Mexico is going to have a little bit of wind shear, but this is why I'm so concerned about this, because of these wind shear patterns showing weak to minimal wind shear going on right here, weak to no shear going on as the system starts to organize and develop. There is going to be a little bit of wind shear that's going to start kind of forming to the north of the system. That can be largely attributed to the outflow because that's how this typically happens. But regardless of that, we're going to be entering some really good conditions. They're not exactly like Hurricane Lee or Hurricane Beryl conditions, but they're pretty damn close to that happening. So we got to pay close tabs to that in terms of wind shear. And as we go later down the road, the wind shear across the Atlantic really starts to quiet down, especially in the Caribbean Sea. There is going to be a little bit of wind shear in the main development region, but that kind of offsets, and you start to see a wind shear pattern that indicates that, hey, this tropical season is about to really wake up. We need to pay very close attention to that. Last thing we're going to go ahead and show you is the moisture forecast, at least in this regard. Then we're going to show you some ensembles, and then we're going to show you the models. But here's the moisture forecast for what's going on. Here's the moisture. Where this thing is going to be developing, it's going to be in a very large pocket of moisture. That is very concerning, to say the very least. Because, yeah, there's a little bit of dry air to the north of it, but that's not going to affect it. That's not going to affect it because there's not very much wind shear to allow dry air to get into the system. And then you're going to have this thing organizing and potentially developing. And now what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing a low pressure system starting to develop. And you're going to see this breakdown of the Sahara dust. And then from then on out, all hell is going to break loose, ladies and gentlemen. For the next 10 weeks, we are going to see some very big tropical systems right here. And remember, we saw Colorado State's forecast yesterday where it went from 25 to 23 named storms, but the ACE has stayed the same. So they're telling me, hey, this is going to be more of a quality over quantity type of year, and the storms that do form have the opportunity to be very, very powerful. And we're still going to see a lot of named storms, don't get me wrong, but these storms are going to be very strong and very powerful. And I've been screaming about this since last year, because as soon as I saw that no systems got into the Caribbean, I was like, we need to watch this year very closely. Next thing you know, Beryl forms, and Beryl just barrels through the Caribbean over all that untapped OHC, which, by the way, didn't even do a thing to it because it moved too quickly, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. And let's go ahead and show you the models before I start rambling about why Beryl was such a historical mess for an hour. So here's what we have with the ensembles. This is the latest from the European. The European right here has almost every single ensemble calling for this thing to develop. And another thing I'm very concerned about is taking a look at this. Every single model run has trended this further and further and further to the west. What this is telling me is the Bermuda High is going to be a lot stronger than what we were anticipating, and that puts more people in the line of fire for this thing, regardless if this is a tropical storm or a hurricane or not, which I fully believe it's going to be the latter. That's concerning to say the very least. And considering the fact that we're no longer in an El Nino, the Bermuda High is going to be strong enough to drive systems into the Caribbean, drive them into the Antilles, drive them into the continental United States, which some models are already starting to show, including some of these ensembles that have a more southerly track and pushing it towards the Gulf of Mexico. But regardless, almost every single European ensemble wants this thing to develop. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS. It's starting to get its act together. We got to pay attention to that, but it's finally starting to get its act together, and we're already starting to see some ensembles having this thing organized and develop, according to the GFS. But the Europeans been leading the charge, and now all of the operational models are going, oh my god, we got to pay attention to this, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Let's go ahead and start with the European operational forecast. I'm sure you guys kind of alluded to this a little bit with the shear and moisture forecast, but I always like to start here just to show you what other models are looking at. And I also want to compare this to the 12Z runs because I want to show you how much further to the west these models have trended. So here's what we have with the European. This thing starts to organize south of the Lesser Antilles, makes landfall in the Dominican Republic as a tropical storm, moves through the Bahamas as a hurricane, as a developing hurricane, and then potentially brings some impacts towards the continental United States, towards the Carolinas and Virginia. Let's compare this to the 12Z right here, ladies and gentlemen. This thing has shifted quite a bit to the west. That is concerning to say the very least. And even going back to the 0Z, it's shifted even further to the west from there. So we're seeing boom, boom, boom. Every single model run is trending this further and further to the west, which puts the continental United States as well as the greater Antilles and potentially the Caribbean more in the line of fire. So let's go ahead and show you the GFS and do a similar situation right here. We're going to use the 0Z GFS, and then we're going to show you the 12Z GFS for comparison right here, both yesterday and today. Here's the 0Z GFS, having this thing organized actually rather quickly, having this get down to strong tropical storm to weak hurricane strength as it approaches the Leeward Islands, then moves through Puerto Rico and maybe makes landfall in the Dominican Republic, and then this thing starts to make a turn to the north as the system starts to potentially move out to sea. This is what we were seeing at the 0Z run. Let's go ahead and show you the 12Z yesterday. The 12Z yesterday didn't really have much going on. I will say the GFS is finally starting to pick up on it. And the GFS yesterday had this thing making landfall in the Gulf of Mexico, which was pretty interesting. But we can go ahead and show you the 12Z now. Let's go ahead and show you, compare that to the 0Z over here and the 12Z over here. Another shift to the west, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we are so concerned about this, because with every model run, it seems, it's shifting this hurricane further and further to the west and pushing this more and more towards the continental United States. And the reason for that is because we see the Bermuda High starting to reorganize. It gets act together, so that's what we're paying attention to. Let's go ahead and show you the Canadian model right here. Let's go ahead and start with the 0Z just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. The CMC didn't really have much happening at the 0Z, which I thought was pretty interesting, at least not right away. The 12Z was more interesting, so I can go ahead and show you that. The 12Z Canadian, as the system moves through, this is where it had it going through. It had it moving through Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Antilles, and then it had it starting to move out to sea here. Let's go ahead and show you the 12Z from today. The 12Z from today has it pushing a little bit further to the east, but I find that pretty interesting considering the rest of the models are calling for a stronger Bermuda high than what we were originally looking at. But oh well. The last model we'll show you is the Icon. We'll show you the 0Z, the 12Z, and from yesterday, and the 12Z for today for comparison. Here's the 0Z for today. This thing is showing signs of organization as it approaches the Antilles, makes landfall in Puerto Rico, moves north of Hispaniola, and then this thing starts to ramp up and organize as it moves east of the Bahamas. Here's what we were seeing at the 12Z yesterday, much further to the east as this thing started to turn. Here's the 12Z for today. This thing moves a little bit further to the west, not nearly as much as the European and the GFS were advocating for, but the point I'm trying to make here is alarm bells are starting to go off on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, and we are looking at a really good opportunity for the system to organize and develop, as well as several other systems behind it that have that same opportunity. But we'll get to that later tonight in the stream. Be sure you do not miss that. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. Shout out to my Patreon members, Daniel, who is an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. If you want to come join my Patreon, it is in the first link in the description down below. It would be much appreciated. You are publicly and personally supporting the channel. Also, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.